see is the battle. You see my victory. When all I see is the mountain, you see a mountain move. And as I walk through the shadow, your love surrounds me. There's nothing to fear now, for I am safe with you. So when I fight on my knees with my hands lifted high, oh God, the battle belongs to you. Every fear I lay at your feet, I'll sing through the night. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. And if you are for me, who can be against me? Oh Jesus, there's nothing impossible for you. When all I see are the ashes, you see the beauty. When all I see is a cross, God, you see the empty tomb. So when I fight on my knees with my hands lifted high, oh God, the battle belongs to you. Every fear I lay at your feet, I sing through the night. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. An almighty fortress, you go before us. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. We shine in the shadows, win every battle. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. Almighty fortress, you go before us. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. Shine in the shadows, win every battle. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. So when I fight, I'll fight on my knees with my hands lifted high. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. Every fear I lay at your feet, I sing through the night. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. Oh God, the battle belongs to you.
Invite your peeps. Invite your peeps.
Hello, welcome to Online Church. My name's Lavon, and I just want to make sure you know we are also meeting in person on Sundays at 9:15 and 10:45. And thank you for your generosity in supporting this ministry. I just want to remind you there are 3 different ways you can give. You can give online, by text, or by mail. And most importantly, make sure that you check out all our Easter week activities.
Welcome, I am Pastor Dave, and I have a megaphone. And I like to use it. I have a story. So I want to say that I'm not a cheerleader. I was never a cheerleader, and just because a person has a megaphone doesn't make them a cheerleader. You probably knew that. I get it. But I have a connection to cheerleaders. See, when I was in like 4th and 5th grade, my brother played on the varsity football team, and I was the ball boy. And this was a small school, and what that meant is that when there was an away game, the varsity team, the varsity cheerleaders, and the ball boy, we all traveled on the same bus. And we'd get to the school, and I had a few ball boy type duties, like I had to fill the Gatorade and stuff like that. But then there was always these gaps of time where the team is preparing, they're in their locker room doing football stuff, I don't know. And it left me to hang out with the varsity cheerleaders, which I thought was pretty cool. They probably thought I was annoying because they're the varsity cheerleading squad, and I'm like 11. But that's my cheerleading story. I'm pretty proud of it, actually. Not many guys got to hang out with the varsity cheerleading squad like I did. They didn't invite me to, I just did, but but it was fun, and they never let me use their megaphone. I never got to do any cheers with them, and I don't have a cheer for you this morning. Maybe drop in the comment below what your cheer for the morning would be. Like one of those 2, 4, 6, 8. I'm not even going to try because I still have an ounce of dignity. But I do like my megaphone. My wife hates my megaphone, by the way, and it would probably do her a big favor if I gave this away after the message. So if you have a kid that needs a megaphone, drop that in the comments below, and just maybe they can have my megaphone. My wife will deliver it, I am certain. So I was never a cheerleader, but I brought a megaphone because this morning we are talking about speaking. We are in week 4 of our Vision of the Valley of Dry Bones series, Seeing Life When You Feel Surrounded by Death. Week 1 was a look at God being sovereign. Week 2 was about seeing what God sees. Last week, week 3, was about hearing the words of God. And today we're talking about speaking. And if you're going to talk about speaking, you need a megaphone, because this is the exact imagery you need for speaking and declaring a message, right? So I got a megaphone. I promise I will put that down and stop using it. I know that it is amusing, but it's mostly amusing me, I think. I'll refrain. We're looking in Ezekiel chapter 37, 1 through 14. Let's read this story. Then the Lord took hold of me, and I was carried away by the Spirit of the Lord to a valley filled with bones. He led me all among the bones that covered the valley floor. They were scattered everywhere across the ground and were completely dried out. Then he asked me, Son of man, can these bones become living people again? O sovereign Lord, I replied, you alone know the answer to that. Then he said to me, speak a prophetic message to these bones and say, dry bones, listen to the word of the Lord. This is what the sovereign Lord says. Look, I'm going to put breath into you and make you live again. I will put flesh and muscle on you and cover you with skin. I will put breath into you and you will come to life. Then you will know that I am the Lord. So I spoke this message just as he told me. Suddenly, as I spoke, there was a rattling noise all across the valley. The bones of each body came together and attached themselves as complete skeletons. Then as I watched, muscles and flesh formed over the bones. Then skin formed to cover their bodies, but they still had no breath in them. Then he said to me, "Speak a prophetic message to the winds, Son of man. Speak a prophetic message and say, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Come, O breath, from the four winds, breathe into these dead bodies so that they may live again." So I spoke the message as he commanded me, and breath came into their bodies. They all came to life and stood up on their feet, a great army. Then he said to me, "Son of man, these bones represent the people of Israel. They are saying, we have become old, dry bones. All hope is gone. Our nation is finished. Therefore, prophesy to them and say, this is what the sovereign Lord says. O my people, I will open your graves of exile and cause you to rise again. Then I will bring you back to the land of Israel. When this happens, O my people, you will know that I am the Lord. I will put my spirit in you, and you will live again and return home to your own land. Then you will know that I, the Lord, have spoken, and I have done what I said. Yes, the Lord has spoken." And I love this story. I love the imagery of the story. I love that this is a conversation between God and his prophets. But I also love that in that conversation, in that imagery, in the valley, in the vision, in all of that, God is inviting Ezekiel in to be a part of the work that God is doing. I love that God doesn't just show Ezekiel what he's doing with Israel. He doesn't just show Ezekiel how he's going to bring life to these bones. He invites Ezekiel in to be a part of the process, to be the one to speak the words that bring life to the dry bones. See, God told Ezekiel, "Speak life to the bones." And Ezekiel listened, obeyed, and he spoke the message of life, and the bones came together and stood up and became alive. And I love that God included Ezekiel in the process. And so it causes me to wonder and to question if in that story God didn't just do it by himself, but he included Ezekiel. He wanted Ezekiel to be a part of it, and he commanded Ezekiel to be a part of it. If that is how God worked then, how does God work now? Because what I know is in that story, God spoke the message. Ezekiel relayed the message, and God brought life where there was death. And I can't escape the idea that God is doing the same thing today here in our city. That the very message of God is going to go forth, and it's going to speak life where there is death. And as that is going on, we're a part of the process. That if we are approaching God, if we are learning to see as God sees, and if we are listening as God speaks, what we will hear him saying is, this is the message. And so God told Ezekiel, speak life to the dry bones. And it makes me wonder, what are you speaking to the dry bones? What am I saying to the dry bones? And why did the dry bones listen to Ezekiel? What language did he use? How were his words heard by the dried out bones? What was his message? See, the context of this vision, of this story, is that Ezekiel, this prophet of God, is in exile. Right? The nation has been conquered by a foreign invading army. And the walls, the temple, the city of Jerusalem, been ransacked, destroyed, desecrated. And Ezekiel is, at some point, carried away and is living as an exile in a foreign land. And somewhere in that process, he loses his wife, We don't know the full story there. You can read some of it in a previous chapter in the book of Ezekiel. And what we know is God comes to the prophet and just tells him, your wife is going to die. We think of some disease or something. We're not sure. And so he loses his wife. So he has lost his country, his wife, his city, his temple. And it's in this context that Ezekiel is brought out in this vision to this valley of dry bones. And so when he is speaking to the dry bones, I believe Ezekiel is seeing something there. He's not just seeing bones. He's seeing his people, his friends, his family, his spouse. When he is speaking life, he is doing it in a language that is conveying both his passion and his love for those bones. But he's also speaking from a place of sorrow, of grief, of loss, and of love. And I think part of the reason why God chose Ezekiel and part of the reason why the bones listened to Ezekiel is because he had lived through the suffering, the hurt, the loss. He was speaking a language the dry bones recognized. See, there's a famous C.S. Lewis quote where he says, "We can ignore even pleasure, but pain insists upon being attended to. God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks in our conscience, but shouts in our pains. It is his megaphone to rouse a deaf world." And I believe that, like the story of Ezekiel, God has a message for us to declare to the dry bones around us. And that message isn't a message that is spoke from the mountaintop. No, it is a message we speak from the valley. It is a message that God has given us through our suffering, through our pain, through our hurt. See, what we say in the valley will echo louder than what we say on the mountain. I think the world around us needs to hear a message of hope, but they want to hear that message of hope not from people who have put everything together, who have got all the success in the world. They want to hear the message of hope from people who have walked through the valley by the help of God. Because that's what conveys hope. That when you walk through the valley, you're not alone. And we can tell them that because we have been through the valley. And when we walk through the valley, God walked through the valley with us and brought us through. They want to hear a message that is spoken from experience, from our pain, from our loss, from our suffering. See, pain is something that is, I believe, common to us all, and it reminds us that we are far from home, right? This world is not my home. I have a different home. I belong to a different kingdom. And when I suffer, when I have pain, it should be a reminder that I am far from home. And it should also be a reminder that the people I see around me, the dry bones in the valley around me, they are also far from home. And it is God's desire for me to speak life to those dry bones. See, our words of hope speak louder from suffering. 2 Corinthians 1:4 says, "He comforts us in all our troubles, so that we can comfort others. When they are troubled, we will be able to give them the same comfort God has given us." See, I believe that the words of hope and life are learned in the places of suffering and surrender. See, I think that God has a message for us that he is telling us, speak this to the valley around you, to the bones around you. And we want that message to be one of success. We want that message to be of our success. We want that message to be of how we've got everything wrapped up in a nice, neat bow, how we've figured life out, how we are doing well. But really, what God has for us is a message that says, tell the world how you made it through the valley. Give them the hope that you desperately needed in those moments. Tell them not about how you have everything figured out, but tell them about what you have gone through in your brokenness. Because that is the language they speak. That is the valley they live in. The words of hope and life are learned in the places of suffering and surrender. And I think that too often we want to tell everybody that we're okay, that we've got it figured out. And I think that falls on deaf ears. I'm not saying go mess your life up so you have a message. That's not at all what I'm saying. What I'm saying is don't run away from your pain. Don't run away from your suffering. Don't forget what it was like to be in the place of hopelessness. Don't forget what it was like to need comfort. Lean into those memories, those times, and maybe you're there right now in this moment. And if you are in that moment, I want you to understand and I want you to know that God is letting you walk through this because there's going to come a time where he is going to bring you that comfort. He is going to bring you through that valley. He's going to bring you through that suffering. And he's allowing you to be in that and bring you through that so that he can strengthen you, build your character, and give you a message of hope. And you won't learn the message of hope unless you've felt the hopeless times. So don't be ashamed of where you're at, of what he's allowing you to walk through. Lean into it and know that God is with you. Know that in those times, God is forging you into be the man or the woman that he needs you to be, so that you will speak the language to the dry bones and they will hear it. Romans 5:3-4 says, we can rejoice too when we run into problems and trials, for we know that they help us develop endurance. And endurance develops strength of character, and character strengthens our confident hope of salvation. See, if we want to grow, growth comes through trials. Growth comes through learning to endure, and you learn to endure in the valley. You learn to endure through the suffering. And so if you're in that space, God is building you. God is shaping you. God is teaching you endurance. He is developing your character. He is giving you the words that you will need to speak to see life come to the dry bones around you. And I know that in those moments, it's not easy, it's not fun. But know this, God has a purpose. See, the words of God will be heard by the deaf world. And they will be spoken through the megaphone of your pain. In the story, God tells Ezekiel to speak the message to the dry bones. And I believe Ezekiel could speak the message because he understood the suffering. He could give hope because he had been in a place where he had received hope. He could speak life because he knew what death was. So I don't know where you're at. I don't know if you are in a valley. I don't know if you are going through a difficult time. I don't know if all you see is death. When you look around, if all you see is dry bones, or if you feel like you are the dry bones yourself. But what I'd want to encourage you with is that God desires to use you in this valley. That God desires for you to speak the very words of life. But to do that, we first have to learn the language. And to learn the language means we have to allow God to bring us through the valley. We have to allow God to bring us through the suffering. We have to lean into that. We have to surrender to the purposes and plans of God, even when they are trials, even when there is suffering involved in that. And when he brings us into those places and brings us through those places, he has forged us. And he has given us a new language to speak life. And I want to encourage you, do not hide your megaphone. Right? The megaphone is the thing that God has given you in your pain, in your hurt, in your suffering. And this megaphone is the message he wants you to speak to the world around you. Do not hide your megaphone. Do not be ashamed of your megaphone. So wherever you are at in that process, understand, God is inviting you in. If you are suffering, he is teaching you a new language. If you are on the other side of suffering, be encouraged. He gave you a megaphone. Now go out and use it. If you're in the middle, remember what this feels like. Because there is a purpose for this, and he is going to give you a megaphone through this. And he is asking us, commanding us, and inviting us to speak life to the dry bones. Amen.
I searched the world, it couldn't fill me. A man's empty praise and treasures of faith are never enough. Then you came along to put me back together. Is now satisfied here in your love. Oh, there's nothing better give beauty for ashes. You turn shame into glory. You're the only one who cares. You turn mourning to dancing. You give beauty for ashes. You turn shame into glory. You're the only one who cares. You turn graves into gardens. You turn bones into armies. You turn seas into highways. You're the only one who cares. You're the only one who cares. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing is better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing, oh, nothing is better than you. You turn mourning to dancing. You give beauty for ashes. You turn shame into glory. You're the only one who cares. You turn graves into gardens. You turn gold into armies. You turn seas into highways. You're the